Hey folks, this is Milan, the LSAT tutor. Thanks for checking out my video. And today we'll be going over best practices for your study sessions, for the individual study sessions, what to focus on. All right, so as usual, we'll be covering, here's an overview. So, what is a conducive study environment? What kind of material should you use? And how should you approach each session? So, to give you basic answer, essentially, you to get the most out of these sessions, out of your study sessions, you want to create the right environment, be emotionally centered. You want to choose the and you also want to choose the right materials for your current stage in the study cycle, and you need to practice active learning. All right. And as usual, before we jump into it, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, etc. Helps me out a lot. And feel free to check out my site for more articles and videos. And I've got over 20 hours of LSAT prep completely for free. All right, so let's take a look at the first thing, which is the study environment. So, what kind of environment is best for an effective study session? Essentially, you're most effective when you're studying when you're in a place where you can focus and where you can concentrate. So, what do you want to do? You want to choose a quiet, comfortable, and distraction-free space. If your home isn't ideal, you want to, go study at a library, try studying at a library. But what I recommend is essentially avoiding places where you're likely to be distracted. I mean, this stuff is difficult as it is. You don't want to add additional distractions. So I generally recommend students to avoid, coffee shops, restaurants, cafes, that kind of stuff. I mean, it may seem, good to get out of the house every now and then, but you want to keep that in mind. I have had some students tell me that they use that to practice their ability to get focused, just so they can, learn to tune out the distraction. I think there's other ways of doing that. So, and I have this in other videos with respect to things like meditation and all of that. If you feel it works for you, you can try it out. But in general, I don't recommend it to students. I think it's best to go somewhere where it's quiet, comfortable, and distraction free. Likewise, studying, you want to try and study in the same place, because if you do that, you're going to create a routine. And routines are just very important, routines, habits for just sustained effort. And studying for the test takes a while, takes a lot of difficult, sustained effort. So creating a routine will be helpful. And part of that is just going to the same place. Likewise, it's crucial to choose the right time. So you want to pick a time where you are mentally sharp and you have really no other obligations. Obviously, you're not distracted by that. Um, Essentially, the way that you practice is the way that you're going to perform. So you want to try and be as sharp as possible. This varies from people to people. Some people are sharper at night, some people are sharper in the morning. I've had students get up 4 in the morning to study. I've had students who were perfectly fine after work, taking a nap, etc. I'm more of a night person, so it's up to the individual. But try and find a place that, try to find a time where you are at your best. And of course, since this varies from day to day, this could vary from day to day depending on your obligations. You want to try and set a specific time or times and try and to stick to them. So make a schedule. If you make a schedule and just and you try and stick to it, it'll help you balance this LSAT preparation with all the other commitments. So try and do it on a weekly basis is what I found is best. Every week set up a schedule, and then you can make adjustments as you need. And as I mentioned, mindfulness techniques and positive thinking can actually help you focus and help you be more productive during your sessions. So prior to a session, relaxation and positive visualization meditations can help you get motivated and help you stay on track. And then, during the sessions as well, particularly if you're getting frustrated, getting stuff wrong, you can try and do certain recentering techniques, etc. And after session as well, focus on your successes, no matter how minor, how small. If you do that, it's going to be useful for helping you maintain that motivation for the kind of sustained effort that you need. So you want to combine these. I do recommend implementing some techniques. So you want to combine that with a well-planned study environment that's essentially going to create, I feel, and just in my experience with my students, really the kind of best conditions for successful sessions. Now, with respect to some of these techniques and positive thinking and meditation, and all that, I actually have a couple of videos where I go into that in depth on my channel. So you can check that out. So I won't spend too much time talking about that here. So you can look at that. But I definitely recommend that. I think it's something that is not emphasized enough as just an additional part, as an additional resource or tool in your tool belt when you're studying. All right. So with respect to that's my suggestion with respect to the study environment. Now, with respect to study materials, what's going on there? So what do your study session materials look like? And the basic answer to that is that your prep materials are generally going to fall into two categories: the ones that teach you concepts and the ones that are designed to give you practice with specific problems. So you can essentially think of the various prep materials that cover and explain concepts as textbooks. So think of, like, the textbooks you've had in school. So the concepts that I'm talking about might be just fundamental reasoning concepts, or it could be more specific concepts related to games, like game types, passages, breaking down a passage, what are the elements, arguments, the different types of arguments, different question types. And in order to answer the questions in those different sections, you need to have an understanding of the material. So what are they presenting? What are you dealing with? And so when you're learning these fundamental concepts, that's the goal. The goal is to gain clarity on what it is you're presented with, so that you have a solid foundation to build on, so that you have just a better context when you are approaching the question. Now, speaking of which, contrast the drills, the drilling part, that's designed to provide practice applying those skills and approaches that you learned when you were learning the concepts and how to approach them. So you won't necessarily be doing just questions when you're drilling. There's specific techniques for breaking down games, for breaking down passages, for even breaking down arguments that, just repetitive practice in that sense, in that sense. But that being said, doing exercise sets of questions is an incredibly important part of drilling, because the test, you're tested on, or your points that you get are on the questions you get correct. So you have to do the questions. So what you're doing there is you're practicing applying the approaches for those various elements of the test repeatedly, so that you internalize the right way to do the test. So these textbooks and these drills are the primary ways that you learn the concepts and the frameworks. The textbooks provide you with essential knowledge and explanations, while drills allow you to practice applying those concepts. Okay, now the best way for most students to go about this is to structure the overall prep in a step-by-step process. So first, you want to study a part of the test using prep materials. Then you want to practice answering questions without a time limit. As you get better, you want to gradually introduce new material, learning the concepts and the approaches and all of that, while you continue to practice what you've learned so far. So you'd be doing the stuff that you learned. You're not necessarily going to be learning, across the board, uh, a particular section for months at a time. You'll learn the concepts and sort of elements and question types, or whatever it might be, game types. And then you'll be doing a lot of practice on that, because a big part of the test is just the execution. So as you learn new things, you're continuously practicing what you've learned up to that point, and that way you're maintaining what you're understanding, what you learned as you move forward. Now, in addition to learning the material and then practicing applying it, so learning how to get the question right, get those questions right, you also need to develop your execution. Uh, and execution basically means working under time constraints. So learning how to do this under test conditions. So you have to then start doing drills under time constraints. And you'll do this once you've learned everything and then practiced enough so that you've gotten good at it untimed. You then do it timed. And like I said, you really only want to do that once you've developed a good understanding after doing untimed study. Okay. So this is actually a fairly brief overview. I actually go into overall study schedules in a lot more detail in other articles and other videos. So make sure to check those out. In fact, I with respect to the schedule part, I actually have a video a couple of videos that go into that. And then you'll see in the part two, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video, this is part one. In part two of this video, I go into what specific study sessions look like across the different sections. But essentially, this is a brief overview. And so what you want to do is learn the material, practice it on time, then practice it time. You can also check out my course on my site where I've got the over 20 hours of prep. So you can see how I actually structure the materials there, what a class would look like, etc. Okay, so that's what a study session would look like. Now, with respect to how you would approach a particular study session. So how do you approach the material during the study session? So basically, in addition to making sure that you're working on the right material in the right order, an effective study session also involves using what I call active or what is called active learning techniques to fully understand and then apply the concepts. So, first thing is active learning requires more than just reading through the prep materials. So most of the concepts on the test are not actually inherently difficult. The challenge comes more from the volume of the material and the subtle differences between some of the concepts and their everyday usage. So when learning a concept, it's very important to engage in focused reading. This involves visualizing and then clarifying the concepts. You're not just reading it, you're not just sounding it out, you're trying to deeply understand it. And so this is something that I cover actually in another video with respect to how to read the arguments and the passages, focused reading, but it applies to anything that you're trying to understand, including the framework for how to understand the test, how to learn from the study materials. So you can take a look at that. But essentially, what you're doing is you're training yourself to deeply engage with the materials. So you don't want to just sound out the words in your head as you're reading them. You're trying to think about and visualize and imagine what they're saying. Um, uh, Visualize and imagine, and then clarify if it's unclear, simplify, etc. So you can take a look at the video where I cover focused reading with respect to the arguments and passages. I go into a lot more depth over there. And in addition to that, when studying a particular concept, it's actually very useful and very helpful to not just read, but to highlight, to write down key information such as definitions, step-by-step instructions, write down clarifying examples. So this information can then be used to create summaries for review, both during and at the end of each study session. And this technique helps to ensure that you're actively processing and internalizing the material. And in addition to that, you can also, so not just, highlighting, write it down, but more specifically, you can use flashcards. I recommend flashcards. I mentioned summaries. You can try creating mind maps where you're connecting the different concepts, various diagrams if you're more of a sort of visual learner. And all these tools can help you organize the information visually and make connections between those different concepts, which can actually improve it gives you the context and it helps you improve the overall understanding of what you're presented with. When you're doing the practice drills, this is important. You want to focus on applying the skills you've learned from the study materials. The goal is to have a clear understanding of the concepts involved and a clear understanding of the mechanics for the questions. Or if you're approaching a game, for how to make the deductions or how to make test diagrams, or the passages, how to understand the structure of the passages, etc. So that's the goal. It's not about getting the questions right or getting as many questions right as you can when you're doing your drilling. That's something that I found is a very common thing with a lot of students. The goal is to do the drilling set and try to get stuff right. It's not to get it right. You're thinking of drills as practice. The goal is to repeat the appropriate mechanisms, to repeat the appropriate approach enough times so that you gain understanding, so it becomes second nature. Okay, so that's more on time stuff. With respect to time drilling, you're learning how to apply what you've learned under test conditions. So you don't, conditions where you need to be automatic and you don't really have the luxury of slow and deliberate analysis. So here, the focus shifts from making sure that you're understanding the concepts and the approach to actually applying everything. So at this point, you should have a good understanding before you get to the time drills. Like I mentioned, you want to have a good understanding of what you're doing and how to approach it. And then when you're doing time drills, you're practicing applying everything under time constraints. And in addition to that, you also want to analyze your performance and you want to adjust your study schedule based on your weaknesses. So as you go through a session, keep track of the types of the questions, the games, the passages where you're making errors, and use that to adjust your future sessions. So, for example, if there's a particular question type you're consistently getting wrong in your exercise sets, you want to keep revisiting that until you start seeing improvement. So this is what a study session is going to look like. You're engage in focused reading. You're not just, visualizing and clarifying. You're also writing stuff down, making summaries, highlighting, flashcards, etc. The goal is to then apply that understanding to the if you're doing if your session involves doing drills, the goal is to apply that to the drills, not just to try and get stuff right, but to learn the appropriate mechanisms and uh, sorry, and then yeah, and if you're doing time sets, then it's a question of execution, practicing your execution, and of course, you always want to have an analysis so that you are uh, making sure that you are working on your weak areas and improving those. Okay, well, to summarize everything, to recap quickly, so studying for the LSAT is most effective when you're in a place where you can focus and concentrate. The prep materials generally fall into two categories: those designed to teach the concepts, think more like textbooks, and those designed to give you practice with the problems, exercise sets. And in addition to making sure that you're working on the right material in the right order, an effective study session also involves using active learning techniques to fully understand and apply concepts. Okay, so in this video, we did an overview of the best practices for the sessions. Make sure to check out part two, where I go into more detail with respect to study sessions for specific parts of the test, specific sections. When I talk about the right material in the right order, so what that would look like when you're learning games, arguments, etc. And of course, you can check out my site for more videos, articles, and my free prep course with over 20 hours of videos to see how I structure it there and what a particular lesson would look like in terms of how I present the material and how I have you do exercise sets. Okay, so thanks for watching, and until next time.